In today's Nonsense Wars production, we look at the trade-offs between controlling powered-up devices with PyBricks versus the official app. I've had a decent amount of experience with both now, and I have an opinion, but I will save that for the end. First, the hardware requirements. Both systems, of course, need PU hubs, but the official app only works with the City hub, while PyBricks works with any hub, Technic, Spike, etc. Furthermore, the powered-up app only works on mobile devices, iOS and Android though, while PyBricks appears to not work on mobile devices. This error message suggests a browser problem, but I think it only applies for desktop variants. Neither of the two systems have the simple plug-and-play setup of power functions, but the City hub by itself gets very close in certain situations. The PU remote will pair with said hub out of the box, no app required, and control either a train motor or at least some of the more conventional motors. Unfortunately, only the train motor gets speed control. The more useful motors only get on-off, and they will not stay on either. Installing the powered-up app, which of course requires slightly more setup, unlocks a few more almost plug-and-play options, the profiles for actual sets. These controls only work with specific hardware combinations, but if we have a mock with the same config, I can use some controllers out of the box. For example, the profile for the 10277 Crocodile works with the SY, since both models use a Control Plus L motor with the City hub. If we want to do anything more, we have to do some programming, and things start getting complicated. At first blush, the drag and drop coding blocks in the PU app seem like a simple way to write code, but the lack of any official documentation, there are some third-party docs, really steepens the learning curve. I found it hard to interpret the pictures on the blocks, and everyone basically has to learn everything by trial and error. On the other hand, PyBricks has documentation built into its IDE. They have entries for all powered-up devices in an easily navigable structure, though we have found occasional errors. Once past learning Python, theoretically one of the easier programming languages, though not without its share of quirks and features, we have had a fairly easy time understanding how to manipulate various devices in our code. Python also allows us to more easily make complicated code in PyBricks. PU coding blocks might theoretically have the same power as more conventional programming languages, but especially on small devices, building large programs with drag and drop quickly becomes unwieldy to the point of impracticality. While not necessarily true for everyone, I personally find plain text much easier to manipulate, even with the most basic editor. Coding blocks has an apparent advantage in that it doesn't allow us to make syntactically incorrect code, but I see this as a double-edged sword. On one hand, programs can't error or crash in the traditional sense, but we can still assemble blocks in ways that just fail silently. I find debugging these problems more frustrating than debugging traditional code, and I consider it related to the broader documentation issue. Still, the blocks do not require the potentially annoying importing and initializing of devices, probably because of the limited device support. Just the city hub and a few motors and sensors. PyBricks requires us to properly specify hubs and motors and sensors and map them to the proper ports. This can lead to the annoying proliferation of slightly different versions of the same control code for different hub and motor configurations. The Powered Up app has an actual advantage in its programmable control UI. It has a large enough selection of drag and drop buttons and sliders to build a decent variety of controllers. PyBricks can't handle any manual runtime inputs except through the PU remote, which requires some not necessarily straightforward coding. The reverse happens on the output side. Python can print arbitrary logs, while Powered Up can only show numbers on dials. Some control schemes may also work a lot better with the PU GUI. The twin slider controller I used for the October Revolution almost certainly performs worse with the Powered Up remote, since I need to manipulate the rate at which I move the sliders. A press and hold on the plus or minus buttons would not capture this variance, and tapping them faster or slower would not make a good user experience. Both systems allow us to save and load programs, but the PU app does not give us an easy way to share them. We can't move or clone coding blocks from one device to another. Any duplication has to happen manually and tediously. On the other hand, PyBricks can save to text files, which we can then manipulate however we want. We can also copy and paste smaller chunks of code, since Python comprises just plain old text. All of this aside, in my opinion, the worst thing about the Powered Up app is actually the very high power consumption. On my old iPhone 6 and on a relatively new iPhone SE, I can run the app for maybe 2 hours continuously, and the phone gets noticeably warm after just a few minutes of use. This is pretty horrendous given that a fully charged city hub can run a train for potentially more than twice as long. In summary, both systems require an external device, a phone for PU and a computer for PyBricks, though the powered-up remote can work out of the box. The official app has some almost plug-and-play options, depending on your hardware configuration, and coding blocks may have a shallower learning curve for simple things. PyBricks has a steeper learning curve, but it can run more complicated programs on more hubs, and we can share that code as well. The PU app has a UI for control elements, but it cannot use the remote, whereas PyBricks has the opposite problem. If not for the awful power consumption, I would say use Powered Up for simple control schemes and PyBricks for anything more complex. But these days, I have mostly relegated PU to testing. On that note, this is the end of the video. Please consider subscribing if you like what we do, and have a nice day.